Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Purgatory Ironworks. I am your host, Trenton Ty, and man, do I have a great little show for you guys today. Now, compared to the other shows we've been doing, this one's pretty simple. This is going to be what we call a Pintle Hinge. Pintle Hinge has a piece that drives into a post. It has a right angle post, and that the hinge slides over the top of it. It's different from most other hinges is because it is removable. This type of hinge was used in things like farm gates. It was often used in shutters so that shutters could be lifted off and moved around. Pretty simple. Now, I do a tremendous number of hinges for the historical movies that we work on, but very rarely do we actually fold over and lap weld the actual band itself, which is how it was done historically. We cheated a little bit, just roll it and leave it, it's no problem. But today I'm gonna show you how to do it properly. Again, this is a relatively straightforward project compared to something like that damn trivet, but I hope you guys are gonna enjoy it, so let's get into it. So folks, we're gonna be starting with some 1" by 1/4" material. For most of the historical hinge work, our base stock is 2" by 1/4". Now, both of these are kind of super heavy for the historical work. A lot of those historical hinges are super thin. It's just that we tend to overbuild. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start on the end that we're going to put the pintle on. So I am scarfing this so we can fold this over and weld it, and this should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to start my curvature here, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a mandrel in here before we start really folding this all the way over and down. So I'm going to take another heat, and I'm going to grab a piece of 3/8 round stock. This is where it can get a little bit tricky, because once you kind of get it caught right there, you can now go to the edge of the anvil and use that shoulder to tighten it up. Now you can also get the vise in on the action, and if you have a swage block, any of the round portions that allow you to have something to back that round area up can help as well. But for right now, we're pretty close for government work. Now I am going to take another significant heat. I'm going to heat that joker up really well, and I'm going to shape it just a little bit more with a lighter hammer, just because that's still a tad bit sloppy for me. Now, if you're using a short section like this as a mandrel, it's real easy to forget which end is the hot end, so pay attention. All right, I'm going to put my mandrel back into here. Now, when I'm doing a lot of this type of work, I tend to go for a much lighter hammer if I'm just trying to give it a little bit of scoochiness. Seems to work better than the heavier hammer. You don't have as much mass to move, and so it tends to shape it better. Now remember, this is not going to be a precision fit. You're going to have a second hinge for the most part, and even if there's some slop in here, it can get, the other hinge will actually make sure everything stays on course. So that's going to be good enough for government work. And now I'm going to flux this bad boy up, and we're going to take a forge weld right here. All right, I got a good hissing heat. I'm going to seal up that front end first, give her the tippy taps. And real quickly, I'm going to flux again and take another heat. Not going to waste the time there. Let's go right back in. Now I am going to cheat a little bit so that it's easier for me to get the piece down there in the fire. Now you guys often hear me talk about the hissing heat, right? So in mild steel, you can get to a light welding heat where there's just a little spark coming off, but you won't hear it hiss. One of the indicators that I use that I've got a full welding heat is when that piece is coming out, you can hear it hiss. I got to start wiping that anvil off. I just about pooped myself. Okay guys, and now you can see we have a good forge weld, and we have ourselves a socket. Now that looks a lot like the historical pieces I have seen. Now as far as the rest of the bar here, the great thing is you can cut this off wherever you want to and actually make the length of your hinge. I'm going to take a heat right here. We're going to cut this. We'll form our bean end, is what they call it from back in the day. And then this piece with a couple punched holes will be ready to go. I'm not going to go crazy with this thing. I'm going to cut it about 12 inches. and it's going to fall right off there on the ground, so I have to go chase it. You know, it looked like a moron. I'll be right back. So it may surprise you to find out that I don't watch a lot of other blacksmithing videos. I watch old stuff, but none of the new stuff, because one, I am a very vain and jealous person. I really can't stand it when somebody's better than I am, and there's a lot of people that are better than I am. However, I did watch a few videos the other day, and I do have a particular gripe. In so many of the videos, young smiths, stop using sledgehammers as one-handed hammers. And every time somebody gets into blacksmithing, you're going to see them out there with the two-handled sledge, sitting there acting like they're trying to call in all the college girls. Look how tough I am. Folks, it's not going to do you any favors. You're going to blow your arm out, get a 2-pound hammer like the rest of us, and you're going to be fine. All right, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to take these corners off, and I'm going to pull this down actually into a bit of a point. Now notice I've still got that ugly tear sitting there from the cut. That's going to be okay. What I'm going to end up doing is I'll just grind that off. And now, this is a great place to use a spring swage. I'm going to take another heat, and we're going to come in, we're going to neck this down. So guys, in a previous video, I was complaining that I had not set my spring swage appropriately. If you'll notice that right now, this guy has got tension. It's actually all the way closed. If I've got a 1-inch bar, this is going to be a real pain in the hind end to get into the piece to do the work. So as a general rule of thumb, when I'm setting my spring swages, I want my spring swage, ideally, there's a lot of playroom, is to be able to get 3/4 of the width of your material in there. So if your material width is 1 inch, you got to pop it in there. Set this for about 3/4 or somewhere thereabout. You want it to be open enough that you can get the piece in, but you still want to have a little bit of that spring pressure on top of it to keep it from bouncing around as you're working it. All right, here we go. Notice the technique. Don't do it all on one side. Rotate it like you normally would. As it pops up right there, give her a couple tippy taps. Work it down nice and slow and even. And that's not terrible bad. Now we can go back, take our heat, and we're going to draw a bit of a taper on there. Okay, now that we've got those shoulders in there, it makes easy work of getting a nice, even taper. Now, in most of the historical hinges that I have seen, they don't work the taper all the way back. It's usually just a front end decoration. And one other thing to be aware of is that the thickness in a lot of those hinges were uneven. Of course, in my mind, everything had to be perfectly flat. That's not how a lot of these things will work. You can see it's thickened right there. They didn't worry about that. They didn't bring it all the way back down to the original thickness. Didn't matter. It's going to look just like that. It's going to look good. And that's what they were after. So let's grab our punch. I'm going to do 2 holes. I'm going to do one here in the end and then one on the body, and we should be good to go. Now, I made a bit of a boo-boo there. I'm not going to punch yet because I'm still not finished. Even though they did not actually work down the thickness of the piece, they always broke the edges of the hinges. So right now, my hinges have very square edges. So I'm going to take a heat and I'm going to come around the outside and actually chamfer those edges down. Now, chamfer, camphor, 2 different pronunciations of the same word. Most of your northern folks I have heard say chamfer. I have heard a lot of the southern smiths say camphor. I'm not certain exactly what is the correct pronunciation, but understand what I'm talking about. All right, let's break those edges. Remember, when you're doing this type of iron work, one, you don't ever want a factory finish to show. As a general rule, if you're doing really good work, don't ever let there be a factory finish for you to see. Make sure that it's scuffed, dinged, tapped, something so that it's broken up. And a little bit more to straighten, and we're looking pretty good. Now, you see that end right there? It looks a little janky. Now, most blacksmiths are going to be concerned with forging that perfectly. Don't. This is grinder work. Once you get your general outline, take that to your grinding stone, shape it up, and you're going to be a much happier person than trying to take all that time to perfectly forge it. All right, you know I hate this. So now, look at my tongs. Now these are a very handy pair of tongs. They allow me to grab over knuckles or whatnot. But if you're looking at it from the top, can you see that? That little pad hides the knuckle. Well, and I wish I could say this is the first time. All that great speech and camphering that I was doing right there, well, it looks like I did it on the wrong damn side. So I'm gonna take another heat and I'm gonna come back and I'm going to break the edges on the appropriate side of the hinge. Boy, I really don't want to tell you how many times I have made that mistake when making hinges. But thankfully, it is easily corrected. And should not be a problem. Just adds to the authenticity. And just a few tippy taps more. There we go. You know, used to, when I was young and I dropped something, I just reached out and pick it up. Now, if I drop something, I have to seriously consider whether it's worth it having it in my life. All right, folks. I'm going to punch our first hole right here. Now, I'm doing this without the aid of my hold down, which if you're in a rush you can do, but it is almost universally better to do it with the hold down as opposed to without. But we are successful with our first hole. And again, this was going to be a relatively light hinge. So what I'll do is I'm just going to come back in. I'm going to pop me one more right in here and we should be good to go. All right, we're ready for hole punch number 2. Again, remember as you're working, rotate your punch. This accounts for any, if the punch is not perfectly round. Set her down and we're going to start back from this side here. And then move over to the Pritchel and punch all the way through. Remember, if you want to release your punch, give it a couple taps on the side and it should come right out. And folks, there we go. Let's get a little bit of alignment going on here, a little bit of straightening. And she's not looking too terrible bad. So, part 1, successful. Now folks, I did have a piece of 1/2-inch square bar that I was going to use for the actual drive-in portion of the Pintle. I think that's going to be a little too heavy for this one, so I'm going to drop back to a piece of 3/8 square bar. That will contain a 3/8 round pin. Couldn't remember if I had said 1/2-inch to start with or not. Just wanted to give you guys the heads up. Didn't want to be throwing the measurements or anything. So to prepare ourselves for a scarf weld, we're going to come in right here. Of course, we're just going to give ourselves a nice short taper, just like that. And now we'll start to roll it. Clearly, I'm going to need a little bit more heat there. But that's going to get me started. So we're going to take a full heat and continue to roll this around. Now I probably curved that a little too tight because we do have to roll it. And that's a little bit better. Now I'm going to take my piece of 3/8. And now I'm not going to seize this in here yet. This is just to act as a mandrel right now. Just to have something to hammer down to. Now again, that trick I showed you by placing this over that edge of the anvil. Now this is also where the vise is going to come in super handy in just a second. But like I said, that's looking fairly good right there. Actually, it looks like really janky, but it's going to work. How about that? All right, we got ourselves a good welding heat. I'm going to make that first initial weld right there. I'm going to come back in with another fluxing, and I'm going to take another heat. Now again, that little piece right there is tough if it's sitting at an angle, so I'm going to cheat a little bit again. so it's easier to get that piece down in the fire and get the heat where I need it. And before I go, if you're worried about melting that, you should be able to do this without melting that in. But of course, remember, if it's getting a little hinky on that side, dip that edge right here in water and that will help you. Good, bright, full welding heat. Poop myself a little bit. Gotta start wiping that borax off the anvil. Okay, not terrible bad. And now we can get a piece of our 3/8 cut to go in there, wedge it in, and then attempt our forge welds. Okay, full disclosure time. Welding in pintles has always been a bit of a problem for me. Now, I am positive that back in the day that they used a swage block around with some other tools, but I've always done it just freehand on top of the anvil because we don't do a lot of this type of pintle hinges that we don't cheat with an electric weld. I'm doing this raw, straight out bareback on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that piece of 3/8 a little bit longer than I need it, just so I've got something to handle it with. And then hopefully if we get a good weld, then I'll cut it back to the length that we need. All right, here we go. I'm going to cut about a 2-inch length. Now, I was about to tell you that I was not going to cut it all the way off so I could use this to put it in the piece. However, life had other plans. Boy, it's a rough day in the forge this morning. Now, hopefully what I'm going to do here is get this wedged in here some shape, form, or fashion. Again, as long as it just wedges, I'm a happy boy. And these are absolutely, you know, there are some mornings, boys and girls, that you probably should have just stayed in bed. But never fear, we're going to make this happen. Because I'm here for you. People pay me money to do this, and by God, I'm going to do it. Okay, we are set and pretty. Now, if you'll notice, it's not all the way through, so I am going to take the opportunity to go over the Prichel hole and bring that on out the bottom. Of course, we can always come back and grind it a little bit later, but I am okay with that. Let's give her the sprinkles, and let's see if we can't get a welding heat. All right, I have a welding heat. Now, what I'm doing here is, if you'll notice, I'm using the lip of that anvil actually to catch that piece so I can tap in there and seal that up, which works pretty well. Now, if you need to actually make sure that it's a flat back, no problem. You can do that after we're done. But that wasn't terrible bad right there. But now, since we are really well conformed, I'm going to flux again, and I'm going to take a high welding heat and see if I can't do the dirty. All right, got an excellent welding heat right here. I'm going to give her the tippy taps from all directions. Flatten that piece out, and ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we have a fairly well-formed pintle. I am happy with that. Okay, not terrible bad at all. Check that out, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm going to tell you something. In the pieces, the historical pieces I have seen, there was some gappage in this. And in the pieces that were really nicely sealed up, I actually think it was rust that was sealing it. So when you're doing these, you know, I think there's to be some forgiveness if the weld isn't completely solid, especially right there at where the two ends meet. Remember, this is just to kind of keep the hinge in place. You know, the load bearing is right here. So I'm willing to give this a little bit of forgiveness. So I'm very happy with this. What I'll do now is take a heat, and we're going to pull that out into a point to drive that into our windowsill or tree or where we're going to put this hinge. You know, if I cut one more thing today and it just falls off instead of staying where I want it to. Now this guy's a little tricky to hold on to. I don't have my hook jaw tongs out here this morning. We usually have the hook jaws loaded up in the traveling rigs. So, oh God, man, screw this video. And ta-da, there she is. So I'm gonna clean her up a little bit. I'm gonna grind our piece down, make sure that we're in the appropriate vertical orientation, and I'm gonna reduce the height of that to fit our hinge. And then we're gonna take a look at how she functions. And yet again, to make sure that I'm laying down the law and keeping it, instead of just telling everybody else what to do, make sure it's got my stamp of approval on there. Okay, now for the moment. Now guys, remember I told you your grinder can do a lot of great work. Let's see, put that right there so you guys can see it. See, we've got this cleaned up into that nice flame tip and wire brushed it a little bit, got all the oxide off. But now we can take our piece here and you can see I've shortened it considerably, did a little bit of grind work to it, but it goes on here and check it out. We have got flexibility. Now, there is some play in this. Do not worry about machine level precision in this, because when you add the second hinge, it's going to actually lock that piece into place. So don't worry about a little bit of play up and down there. Just as long as it turns freely, you are good to go. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not too terrible bad. This guy right here would be driven into the windowsill in a lot of the old homes, or into the post for the gate. Sets in there. In fact, if you work on a farm or you've been out to the fields, most of your cow gates still operate on this same principle. So, how cool. Boy, it has been a rough morning in the forge. Folks, again, I want to thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video, it is brought to you absolutely 100% by the generous support of our Patreons. If you're interested in behind the scenes, please go over to Patreon/Purgatory Ironworks. Come in, join the chat, enjoy yourself, maybe drop $1 or $2 off to help support the work. But outside of that, folks, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time right here on Purgatory Ironworks.